Frank Ocean is music's biggest recluse, and that's by design. But people always wonder, how can he afford to release music so infrequently? Frank's actually answered this question through a conversation with Aziz Ansari that went like this.
Frank, how do you do it, man? You never do any press, you barely tour, and you only put out your music when you really want to. What's the secret? And he said, oh man, you just gotta be comfortable making less money, that's all.
But there's a huge asterisk on that answer, and after grasping it, you'll better understand why Frank's able to release music the way he does. And no, it's not just because his music is good, that's only part of it. So in the very limited amount of Frank Ocean interviews that exist on the internet, some of them manage to touch on his creative process and ask him how he approaches music. And the one through line is story. So okay, now you're like, Serge, storytelling and songwriting are arguably synonymous. What are you really getting at here? Frank is so dedicated to that idea of story that he takes it to a whole nother level. Let me put it this way. When something happens to you and you immediately retell that story to a friend, you don't have much context. All you know is that it happened to you, you don't know why, you responded how you did, and it just happened. Only a few months or years later do you have the ability to say, oh, that was my blank phase where I was very blank and that's why it happened. In all honesty, I just look at that as a good lesson on blank now. You fill in all the blanks. Okay, so now imagine that you're Frank and you care about stories so much that you want the audience to not only have the story, but also the context and your takeaway. Now multiply that by 14 or so tracks. That could very easily take a few years at the minimum, just for enough interesting things to even happen to you. So now you're saying, okay, that's great, but nobody can afford to make art like that. You'll never gain traction or momentum. It won't really go anywhere quickly enough for you to become an artist. How does Frank survive like this? And more importantly, how does he get people to care when he comes back after a long silence? Well, put simply, it's because he didn't decide to professionally pursue his own work until later in his career. He wrote songs with generally relatable themes meant for other bigger artists to snatch up for their own. He did this over the course of a few years spent in LA with the help of a duo called Midi Mafia, along with Nigerian songwriter Dapo Torimira. A leak in 2011 revealed that Frank had built up a back catalog of about 60 plus songs meant for other artists to take as their own, with a remarkable attention to detail for just demos. In the end, Frank was able to write songs for Justin Bieber, Beyonce, and Alicia Keys, and even wrote some hooks for Kanye and Jay-Z. It was only after establishing a bunch of connections through these songs, and ultimately a more comfortable financial situation outside of himself, that he was able to take his current creative approach. In other words, loosen your financial dependence on your own art. And looking back, it feels like joining Odd Future in 2010 was part of that strategy. Surround yourself with people who are also well connected, who you click with and will ride for you if you ride for them. If you're still unsure of whether Frank was set on loosening his financial dependence on his own art, just look at the rollout for his debut mixtape, Nostalgia Ultra. He was signed to Def Jam at the time, and as a result of feeling neglected and thus not really wanting their input on it, he made Nostalgia Ultra on his own and put it out for free online, demonstrating quite blatantly why he was in music, and that again, he was not really profit-oriented when it came to his own musical effort. Given I'm not too sure Frank's up to much ghostwriting these days, we now have Homer to financially take its place. If you're unaware, Frank has a jewelry line called Homer, and they sell a $30,000 ring. Now, it's kind of irrelevant what you or I think of Homer or how good the pieces are. All you have to understand is that it's passive income to support the approach to making art we just talked about. In fact, let's circle back to that. The reason people care when Frank Ocean comes back after saying nothing is because he's created a situation for himself where he can be authentic at a high level. He's financially free to approach his art that way. And that's the Frank Ocean secret sauce. If every 5 years we get an introspective, thoughtful, cinematic work of art that's clearly been cared for and nurtured over time in an organic way, I think I'm okay with that, and I think everyone else is too. Frank doesn't speak much in interviews or really get personal because living life is part of that process. People asking him, oh, so what's next? Where have you been? What are you up to? Actually answering that question would take away all the anticipation. If he's gonna get personal, it's gonna be in music and it's gonna mean something. The second he says anything like, yeah, actually I've been going to Trader Joe's a lot lately, is the second his approach loses value. Right now, if I asked what you think Frank Ocean's up to, he's got you thinking he's in Paris, walking around, maybe stopping at the local bakery, sharing a cigarette with a French girl who invites him back to her place, and they talk about how she's trying to quit crack. When in reality, he's probably just taking a dump and scrolling on his phone like the rest of us. Remember, living life is part of the process. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.